All right. Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com, sitting here with a very, very dodgy throat today on a cold Sunday afternoon. It sounds worse than it is. I guess I've become Hunt Sales and Chips Enough put together overnight somehow. In any event, fortunately, I have a guest here today who I know will and can handle most of the talking anyway. It's my profound pleasure and honor to welcome a good buddy of mine, a tour manager extraordinaire, an author, bodyguard, etc., etc. Most importantly, a real Midwest motherfucker. Please welcome Steve Silver.
Hey, everybody. Nice to be here. Thank you, Joel. What an introduction.
Yeah, it's been a minute, man. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Other
Besides
than
sounding like this, which is very rock and roll, it's like,
it is.
hard living.
You can tell people you had to go to Madison Square Garden last night and sit in for a couple songs with Kiss for their last show, and that's why your throat hurts.
Right. But what I'm going to tell people is look, you've read my body of work. This should not surprise you at all. Although in reality, I just slept in a cold night. That's pretty much what happened.
Yeah, that's it. I know. It's great, right? It's like every once in a while I'll get up and it's like Claudia's like, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "I hurt myself sleeping." And I think to myself, I'm like, there was a lot of my stories are like this, so we might as well start with one. It's like I remember when I was in the middle of fucking nowhere, right? We were in Ghana, and I'm like, okay, well, they'll chop your hands off if you try to buy drugs. But let's send Steve to see if he can find some drugs. And it's like, so you go in the middle of nowhere, you got a guy who interprets for you to the guy who's going to do the deal, right? So you got like two extra guys, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and all this is happening, and the national police come, and everybody pushes you down a fire escape out the back of this abandoned building, and you roll 2 stories down a metal fire escape that's really kind of hanging by one bolt. So while you're rolling down the fire escape, clutching drugs, right? And the thing's trying to fall off the building. And somehow I land on my feet, like when I fall off the fire escape, I land on my feet, run down the block, and some black market taxi. I just get in and I go back to the hotel. I get there, I do drugs with the band, everything's fine. I can do that. But now I can't sleep in the same spot for 4 hours without throwing a fucking muscle.
And look, putting on socks can be a motherfucker sometimes.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah.
mean?
Whatever. I mean, we're lucky. Could be a lot worse, right?
Hey, man, we're
So
still here. We survived the last 3 years.
yeah,
Um, Still standing. I'll take a scratchy throat over the alternative any day.
yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah, a lot of times when I'm writing, some of my stories, especially in the next book, which is really more about the rough and tumble stuff, I'm like, yeah, that hurts all the time. This thing, or it hurts sometimes, right? And I'm like, oh fuck yeah, but you know what? That's a really good story. Why that hurts 40 years later, because what got that broken so bad, or whatever, was a good thing. I wrote this piece about. Do you know the guys from Naked Raygun much? I don't know if you're friends with them or not. Speaking of
No,
Midwest motherfuckers, right? I
I mean,
mean,
I love them. I'm a big fan of theirs, but I've never met any of the guys from Naked
well,
Raygun.
Eric Spicer and I, well, we still are friends, but we used to hang out a lot more. And he would hang out at Exit, and I roadied for that. They're one of the first bands I actually roadied for and got paid for, which is pretty cool because I know how old I am. But there was a thing that we used to do. Chris Bjorklund did it a couple times too, which is on the L, which for people not familiar with Chicago was the public transportation train. Um, uh, I wrote a 15-page story and then recorded it with Glenn Russell, who's a great DJ. He put some music over it with Doug Chamberlain. And it all stems from when guys are bothering women on the train. And it's like, okay, well, this is back in the punk rock days. Like Eric and I wore biker jackets everywhere. We all did, right? And people hated you for how you looked. They didn't even know you. They just, you know. So we would always just kind of stand. You'd usually pick a spot on the train and you'd stand there, right? By yourself or with your buddies. You wouldn't try to sit with anyone. You wouldn't try to make conversation. You wouldn't, there was no reason to have a confrontation with them. It was just get on the train, go to work, whatever. But sometimes late at night or whatever, uh, guys who wished to do harm to women who were by themselves would sit down and start talking to them, and you could get the vibe that it was pretty bad, right? So Eric and I don't know how it started. It wasn't me, but uh, we had a thing, and we would call it "There You Are," and uh, and it goes like this: I walk over in a biker jacket, boots, ripped jeans, to two guys or a guy that's hitting on this woman, and I go, "There you are," like she's my girlfriend, and sit down and start talking to her. 99% of the time, women get that right away, or did back then. I mean, I don't, but now, but, and, would just talk to you like you were their boyfriend or their friend or whatever. And the guy would usually slink away. But the story I wrote was about two guys who did not slink away and nearly beat me to death on the train trying to help her. And I got her off the train and they still were beating me up when we got to the next stop. And it was one of the few times I lost a fight bigly. And it was a huge loss. It wired my jaw together. It gave me like a basket of painkillers at the ER. They're like, look, we know you don't have a doctor, you don't have insurance. It's like, come back in 6 weeks, we'll unwire that thing. Don't need any, just drink out of a straw and take these painkillers, let them melt, because you're not going anywhere for 6 weeks. But my face, when it gets to be fall or cold here in Chicago, which it can be in the middle of June when it gets cold, a couple nights in a row, and my whole face locks up. It's really weird. Like it wakes me up. It's like I can't really describe it, but where they cracked all this kind of separates a little. So I have to hold my face against the door and push my face into the door. It pops it into place. But it only happens once. It's the weirdest fucking thing. It happens like once a year. And then once I pop it into place, it never hurts again until the next year. I mean, the pain goes away instantly.
Hmm.
It's just I've realigned whatever. I tell my doctor that now, and he's like, "Yeah, I've heard of that before, but there's nothing you can really do about it." He goes, "We go back in and break everything," and I'm like, "Yeah, no, we're good." I'll push my face against the door. So anyway, so that's one of those things. Like I had totally forgotten that story until one year I woke up and could not see straight because of the pain. Popped my face into place and sat down and wrote 15 pages on Facebook. And then it kind of took off. People were like, wow, you should tell that story live. And I did, and whatever. But, you know, I, I kind of, like in the middle of telling that story, I mean, you got it. But I'm like, I just kind of imagine how many people are like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? It's like, I would never pop my own face into place. I would never lean against the door and do that. It's like, how does this happen? And to me, it was like, that was a story I kind of forgot about until the pain came back. You know what I mean? So I'm like, I'm really grateful for the pain because that's a pretty good, the story's a lot longer than what I told, but it's you know, those things are, uh, nostalgia is a Greek word for the pain of an old scar or something, right? That's what nostalgia means. And here I am, filled with nostalgia.
Well, anybody watching this, now you know why I brought Steve on as a guest. All right. This is going to go on for a while. So,
Yeah, I'm just getting warmed up, man.
Yeah.
It's afternoon,
Ah,
so you might have a few hours of going here.
strap yourselves in, folks. It's going to get rocky.
Yeah. But what I really came here to say was, anyway.
Well, the way you and I met was through Pigface in 2016.
Yeah.
And we'll get to the Pigface 25 in a bit. But your entry into the Pigface world was you were tour manager for the first tour back in 91.
Yes.
You've also been the TM for Ministry during the Cage for Killing Joke. So let me ask you this question, then we'll dive into all the stories.
Okay.
For the layman, for somebody who's not in the trenches every day,
Okay.
what exactly does a tour manager do on the road?
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Strap yourself in. All right. So I learned on the job, just so you know. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing. I want to make that clear when I started, which is usually the best way to do stuff. But I had been doing security for guys and crewing, right? And uh, how I got to thrown into, I started with ministry, but only for a couple weeks at the end of one of the tours because the tour manager quit.
Really? What a
Yeah,
surprise.
I know, right?
Yeah.
I got like 4 or 5 jobs that way. I worked for LA Guns for 2 weeks because the tour manager quit like the day before they were supposed to go on tour, and I just happened to be in LA at the at the fucking Whiskey A Go Go when they were like talking to somebody who couldn't do it. I was like, I'll do it. But that's later. So anyway, so I went and I was like, okay, well, it can't be that hard because I see that guy and that guy doesn't, he's always running around. He just tells everybody what to do. But it's rough. Okay, so in the old days, before the internet, when I did all this stuff, so that makes it harder, right? Now I don't want to say a lot easier because things are a lot more complicated in a lot of other ways, obviously. As soon as release a lot of tension out of one part of a job, they're always going to fill it with other shit. But if I'd had the internet, if I'd had a laptop or even a cell phone, there were no cell phones when I did this. That's another thing. That's kind of like, so people are like, wow, that guy's old. Um, so if you're lucky enough to go get the job before the tour starts, part of your job is to kind of you coordinate with like the head crew guy, all the talent, musicians, the roadies, security. You kind of have some meetings. You get together. You just like you have an itinerary. Hopefully, it's not your deal. That's the production company's thing, but they'll tell you where you're going. So you hopefully have enough time at that point so that you can plan things out enough. In the old days, what I had to do was get on the phone first thing in the morning before tour even, and call like the first 5 to 10 places we were going to play. You had to make sure the food was going to be right. You had to make sure there was going to be a crew there to unload you. We're going to show up at 2 o'clock on Thursday. Make sure you're there. The show's not until the doors don't open until 8, but we got to be there for sound check at 2. If you're not there at 2 and there's not food in the dressing room, we don't get off the fucking bus, right? And that's where it starts. And it goes from, and then you got to make sure the money's been wired. Back in I don't know how they do it now. I'm sure it's pretty instant now. But in the old days, we wouldn't get off the bus unless half the guarantee money was already paid, and they were supposed to give you the other half before you went on stage, right? And that was just a guarantee. If there was more, which there's never more, of course, but so you spend a lot of time prepping. This is the food. This is this, and then you start talking to other people besides the promoter at those gigs, and that's like the road guys, the runners, the guy who's going to take Ogre to his favorite record store or his favorite toy store, right? The guy who's going to take Paul Raven to a place that specializes in Music Man bases because that's his fucking base. And this store has 50 of them in Seattle. And if we don't get someone to take him and make sure he gets back, he's not going to make it to the show. That kind of stuff. With Martin, where's the drum shop? Who's got, and of course it can't just be fucking drums with Martin. It can't be, oh, I need these snare heads and these tom-tom heads and some tuning keys. It's like, no, do you have a drum shop in town when we get there that will be able to sell us some 17th century goat skin that's been stretched across, a human bone shaped into a circle with some Celtic stuff painted on it because that's what Martin needs, and we probably will need another one by then. So that sort of thing. So there's money, food, lodging are the basics. Then there's the specific stuff. And at some point the lighting guy is going to have to go to a lighting store. So you try to do that in Chicago or Detroit or some of the bigger stores that have rental houses, right? Or have theater districts if they have them, right? Because everybody says, "Oh, just buy everything and take it with you." It doesn't work that way. You know that. I mean, first of all, you lose half the shit, and you always need more stuff. Stuff just wears out. So you're prepping for that before you hit the road. Then once you hit the road, the fun begins. There's a there's one of these next to your side all the time, all the time. It, I mean, in the old days, uh, I mean, I took a shower with the fucking thing up against the wall. So the shower would hit me and you would like cover it with something, but it was in the shower at some of the shittier places we stayed. Otherwise, it was in the bathroom with the bathroom door locked. But you keep your money in there. You got to have money to go on stage. You got to have money to pay everybody. You collect money. You pay out a per diem to all the artists and the techs and everybody else every day. You make sure you have enough money you got to pay the bus driver. You got to pay the bus company. Sometimes the promoters will pay the bus company for you, but usually not. So you're just basically juggling money all day, every day, and it's never enough. Not fucking ever. I don't care whether you're Killing Joke or Guns N' Roses. The fucking money that you have on you is never enough for that day. This is where the kindness of strangers comes in. If I have $5,000, I have to spend $5,000, and Paul Raven needs a new guitar, I got to go to a guy I know in that town and explain to him that I need a new guitar. And then the way that I explain it to him, before I say the fucking words, he knows he's not getting paid, right? Today. He's getting himself and as ever many people as he wants in for you to show. We'll give him t-shirts, we'll give him records. He's going to wait for his money. The nice part about rock and roll is you fucking know a ton of people like that, right? There's stuff I do. When I lived in New York, I had bands who said, "Could you please come to CBGB's and collect our money because we don't have a tour manager, but we need some." They won't pay anybody but the tour manager. They won't pay anybody in the band, which I always thought was a fucking hilarious rule for CBGBs. It's like, we're not going to give the cash to anybody in the band because the band would fight about who got the cash. So Hilly learned a long time ago, give it to somebody. It doesn't matter what their actual fucking job is. They could just be someone's girlfriend, but she had to say, "I'm the tour manager." And he'd go, "I'm giving your tour manager the money," and then it would be done, right? So when I lived like 5 blocks from CBGB. So like Peg Boy or whoever would come to town and they'd be like, "Could you just get our money for us so we could go eat?" So I'd walk over. There was nothing in it for me. They're my friends. I don't care. Sometimes I'd go to the show. Sometimes I wouldn't. Whatever. I had to work. But so stuff like that, right? Or like, "Hey, can you help me figure out where the money went?" Now, in the old days, I knew where the money went because I spent it all on drugs. But I am very good at being I can look at reports and figure stuff out. I'm really good at it, right? So sometimes even to this day, like I said, kids today with their internet and everything. But sometimes people are like, "Why are we spending so much money?" I can kind of point that out. But I digress. Let's get back to what a tour manager does. So I keep the money, I keep people fed, I keep them in drugs, I keep them happy, I keep their families happy, and I make sure they do certain things on time. In the old days, it was, books like this. Now you can do it on the internet, but you had to have notes. Raven has to call Brazil at this time. He has to call London at this time. He has to call Amsterdam at this time. Girlfriends, wives, kids, right? Jazz, same thing. Geordie, same thing. Ogre, Martin's pretty organized, but just tons of stuff. Like even like the guys from making Raygun, right? We weren't worried about that because we couldn't call. There was no fucking cell phone. It's like, "I'll call you when I get to the gig, or I'll call you when I get to a hotel that we're splitting because we don't have any money, right?" And it was just like, okay, but I still had to have make sure you call XYZ, your mom, your wife, your boyfriend, whoever the fuck it is. Let them know you're okay because they're not going to hear from you for 5 days. Once that's checked off my list, we'll get the food together, we'll get the booze together, we'll get the drugs together, we'll get this, we'll get over, we'll get the sound check. Sound check goes okay. Everybody gets fed because there's food there. You always make sure you inspect the food before you go and get the guys off the truck, because if they come off a bus and their food's not ready, that's a bad scene. Then the sound check's awful. It just goes downhill from there, right? So collect money, account for the money, call everybody, try to get people that you're 10 days away from playing at, see if they can send you some of their money early, right? Because that's another way to get some money to get you through to whatever. Because there's times I have fucking sat at a Bucky's, and paid $700 cash for a tank full of gas for a bus, and that was the food money for the next 2 days. Conversely, I've met a very nice fellow who sold me $1,000 worth of cocaine, and that was also the food money the next day. And shame on me for that, but whatever. Kids don't do drugs anyway. So it's everything except the playing of the show. The funniest part about being a tour manager is there's things that you do have to check while stuff's going on, but you've got a crew chief who's got the crew going, right? Your lighting guy's your lighting guy, your sound guy's your sound guy. You've got a security guy probably doing the green room for you. That time on the show is literally and ironically your free time. Oh, kind of. I mean, you walk around, you check stuff, but there's not a lot for you to do right then. And also, shows go on. You're not calling other gigs because they've got stuff going on at that time. Everybody's got something going on at 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, right? So you're not calling and prepping a show the next day. You don't have to get people to the hotel. They've already been checked in. The bus driver is back at the hotel sleeping, or he's in the bus waiting for us to load out. Whatever. Everything's kind of taken care of as soon as the first note hits, right? And then at the end, that's when things kick up again. You got to go back to the promoter, try to get more money, say, hey, there was this, one of the things I learned from Al Jorgensen, which is one of the smartest things I ever saw a guy do, was, the little clickers that there's a ring on them. They keep them at bars, little counter. I always had like 5 or 6 of those in my tour case. And you go get a kid who doesn't have a ticket to the show, and you tell them you're going to get them in for free, and you're going to give them a backstage pass, right? You go, you work for us today. You put a pass on his, you don't give him all access pass because he's going to be back there eating all your food, but you give him a pass, and you say your job is to sit next to this guy and click every time somebody walks in the door. If somebody walks out and gets a stamp and comes back in, don't click them. But I need an accurate click. And you would be amazed at how many times a promoter tells you there's 1,000 people in a place and there's 1,800 or 2,000. It's not even funny. And I know the internet's new and I know everybody's got a phone, but that shit still is the same. Not all promoters, I don't want to say that. I mean, Joe Shanahan's killer. There's a lot of places. And Dave Horniak, Carrie Harris from the Crack Fox. I mean, she's fucking killer. I mean, called me at my hotel room. I opened for the Skate Nags. Now, just went down to tell stories with Claudia, and they were getting together, and they're like, "Hey, do you want to open for the Skate Nags?" I'm like, "Fuck yeah, I do." So we drove down, but I did it for fun. And Carrie Harris is calling me, and she's like, "Hey, I gotta send you this money for your gig." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And she's like, "I have to pay you." And I'm like, "No, just give it to the Skate Nags. I don't need it." And she's like, Are you serious?" I'm like, "Yeah." But a promoter calling you and saying, "Hey, I owe you money," after it's over, come on. Joe Shanahan, Dave Horniak, Carrie Harris, probably it. There might be more. I mean, you've dealt with other guys than I have, but I mean, she's awesome. Those 2 guys are awesome. I would, if any of the 3 of them called me and said, "I need you to put a show together. I need you to come do this," money would be the last thing I would even think about with them. And that's what happens from building relationships with people who are really cool, right? It's like Martin. If Martin said to me tomorrow, "Hey, we're doing a tour. I need you to come." I just have to tell my boss at my day job that I was going to be gone for a month. I mean, I'm good at my job. He couldn't replace me that easily. Plus, it's a car business. No one wants to do it anyway. So, Claudia would be a harder sell than my boss probably. But I mean, there are people that you just drop shit and do stuff for, right? Still, 40 years later. I mean, just is what it is. So that's what tour managers do. They get those relationships going. I'm very, very lucky that I got to work for some bands that struck fear into the hearts of promoters and owners, right? There's nothing like walking onto stage. It's like uh, I don't know if you want to. I have a Geordie story about that. I'll tell you in a minute. But there's no. I got a couple, but there's nothing like walking into a strange town, even a strange country, right? With six guys in a band and two roadies and six musicians standing there, and you are in the most hardcore place in that town. Kids kids dream about being able to hang out there someday, right? Being cool enough to hang out there. You walk in, you fucking own it, and it's like, where's our food? Where's my money? Oh yeah, hi, I'm Steve. Where's my food? Where's my money? You know, it's like but you got to have the band for that, and I've been extremely lucky. I mean, seriously, yeah, you know, Pigface. Yeah, I lived with them for a couple of years. What? I mean, terrified, terrified. Don't make me go get Al. He's on the bus, right? You want to talk to Al? You want to talk to me? Always good to have that ace up the sleeve.
Well, I'll tell you what. This is not going to be a linear conversation. We're just going
Oh,
to.
mine never are.
There's no fucking script here. So why don't I do this? I'm going to start throwing some names at you. Okay.
Okay. Oh boy.
Let me set up the first one.
Okay.
Back in the mid 90s, when I was still in high school,
Oh boy.
I started
Gotta
booking.
hate you.
Yeah, but look at me. I've definitely earned all this.
Okay, that's fair.
So I started booking shows in New Jersey. And, you know, one place was like a little VFW hall, held 300 people. But I figured, what the hell? The worst someone can say to you is no.
Right.
Who cares? But at least you asked the question, right? So I called Wax Tracks one day. Hi, I'm a promoter in New Jersey. If you have any bands coming through this time of year, let me know, blah, blah, blah. A couple hours later, I get a phone call back from Wax Tracks. And for the next hour, I'm listening to like this fucking atom bomb of a personality. It was one of the most surreal conversations I've ever had. And I love this guy to death. And I wish I would have recorded the conversation because it was just fucking fantastic. That person's name, William Tucker. So let's start with William.
Oh, brother. Wow. Tucker was, I mean, fuck, you know, yeah. I mean, there's not many people that leave me at a loss for words, but Tucker's one of them, right? Complicated guy, the sweetest fucking human, right? But when you meet him, like he doesn't want to be sweet. He wants to, play some weird chess with you, with your street cred, right? Like, where are you from? Or do you know so and so? Did you do this? Have you seen this show? What do you think about this record? Whatever, right? And it just goes. But yeah, but there's no expiration clock on conversations with him. We go forever, right? So you want to hear a Tucker story?
Oh God, yeah, please.
Okay. So I'm assuming maybe half of the people watching this might know me to some extent in some way or heard of it. But I don't think that it's hyperbole or bragging to say I'm have had in the past. Now I'm an old man, but I have had in the past a reputation for being uh, a human sponge for any kind of substance or adventure or danger that there was. And I was never fucking terrified. Not, I mean, yeah, probably sometimes I can probably count them on one hand, but like people were afraid to hang out with me. Now, maybe that's my personality, but like people were fine hanging out with me until I was like, hey, I got an idea. And then it was like, well, no, I got to go home. Right. So it takes a certain individual to just shot for shot, toe to toe, hang out with me. That sounds really conceited, and I don't mean it to be, but I mean, you have to be really sure of yourself to not think you're going to get into trouble hanging out with me, at least back then, right? Tucker wasn't afraid for a fucking second. Okay. And in fact, I was like, what the fuck? Like a lot. So, um, first Pigface tour. Do you remember that? It might still be there. I'm not cool. I don't know. The place in Tijuana called the Iguana. Do you remember that place? It might not be there anymore.
I
But
don't.
it was one of those venues, one of those gigs, like 5 stops before. We're like, oh man, we're gonna be at the Iguana. We're gonna be at the Iguana. Like we all just knew. And Martin had planned a lot of that. So he was smart enough to have said, fuck this, we're not doing anything the day before or the day after, right? Because we're going to get there late because there's a crossing into Tijuana's was, I think it still is, but it was an ordeal. And so it's like, who knows when we'll get there. So we got that night. We got to play the next day. And in Martin's mind, way back 6 months earlier in Chicago in the Visible Records, when he's making his plan, he's like, okay, we'll give everybody the day off after. I'm pretty sure I can corral people not to be too fucked up for the show, which I think is cute in retrospect that he thought that. But so my whole thing on that first Pigface tour, after tour managers get their own room, doesn't matter about anybody else. People can double up. Tour managers get their own room. After the first day, Martin's like, you have to stay with Ogre, which was good and bad. So, okay. And then Tucker was part of that. So then it ended up being a Tucker, Ogre, me thing. So Chris Conley, Chris was smart enough to, he hung out with Tucker. I think Tucker was his best friend for a long time, probably up until he passed, maybe even. But Chris could remove himself from that, which was cool. At the time, I didn't really notice it that much. But again, looking back, I'm like, that was smart. I'm not saying that Chris was an angel, and Chris would never say that he was an angel, and that's
I've
part of
read
his
his book.
right. And part of his fucking charm is that guy is so amazing now, right? I mean, it's like, fuck, dude. I'm gonna write a double album about and inspired by Nico, and it's gonna break your heart, right?
That
Well,
fucking album was
fuck.
that album was my favorite last year.
Mine too. Yeah.
Masterpiece.
Unbelievable. Unfucking believable. Yeah. And it's just like, wow, that's amazing. So, that's just, yeah. So we get to Tijuana and Tucker, you have to know Tucker's, comes up to here on me. I've got this haircut. He's got the long fucking hair, the fucking biker hat. Oh, we look like kind of, like Mark Panic likes to say, we look that he and I look a lot like Joe Buck and Rezzo Rizzo from Midnight Cowboy, but Tucker and I definitely had that fucking vibe going too, right? So we're in Tijuana, and I'm about to say a sentence that a lot of my stories have in them at some point. I remember having a really good time, and then I missed a whole bunch of stuff, missed it. But the first thing that I remember is being on the street in downtown Tijuana with Tucker in broad fucking daylight. And we smell. We've been up for 2 or 3 days. And we look like we look, and it's the day of the gig. Now, we got unloaded. I remember getting unloaded. part of the thing when you go to Tijuana is you have to pull into the someplace. Ours was a McDonald's that had truck parking. You have to unload everything from your truck and load it into a truck from Mexico and get it down there. So that there was all that. It was hours of that, right? You have to switch buses. It's a whole thing. To get through all that ordeal, the party starts because we unloaded everything successfully. They had a sound check the day before we played, and it's Pigface, so there's like fucking 30 of us, right? So everybody's off to the races. And I wake up or I come to on my feet in the middle of a fucking street in downtown Tijuana with Tucker. And he's in the middle of a sentence that's something like, I can't believe they wouldn't sell those to us. They're just sitting there on the counter, in the counter. And I'm like, yeah. And I have no idea what he's talking about. And we say, let's go over there. So we go into another drugstore, which is where we had just been, but I didn't remember that part. So what's happening is we're trying to cop Benny's. We're trying to cop every fucking pill that you can get, and you can get them legally in Mexico, right? Some are good, some are bad, but we don't think about quality. We just want quantity at this point. So Tijuana, and there's no way to say this without sounding horrible, but it's just true. It's got a reputation for being anything you want, day or night, 24/7, wide open town. And Tucker and I are covered in $100 bills, and nobody will sell us legal drugs. Do you know how bad of a condition two people need to be in? That somebody that just sells drugs over the counter to anybody who fucking comes in the door will go, no, not for you, man. Right? And it's like the third store. The first two, I don't remember being at. I guess I let Tucker do all the talking. So this one, I'm trying to be cool, and I'm literally putting money on the counter, and they're like, no, no, not for sale, not for sale. So we walk outside, and Tucker has, from that counter to the doorway, come up with a reason why they're not selling to us. It's not because we look bad, smell bad, look crazy, or could be not any of that. Tucker has it. The reason that they are not going to sell drugs to us is they've all gotten together before we got down there, and it's some sort of a conspiracy against William Tucker.
Mm-hmm.
They've been told not to sell to me, Steve, and we got to fucking deal with this. I've had a lot of stuff happen to me. As long as I live, I will never forget turning to William Tucker and talking to him as he's doing this. Now, I'm above him, I'm looking down, and I'm like, Tucker. And of course, because I'm in a state, I'm kind of agreeing with him because I figure it's the easiest way to get this conversation to keep moving. My theory is, why don't you just let me go in then? We're going to go to another place. I'll go in. You stay outside. And Tucker's like, no, fuck that, man. I want them to look me in the face when they're selling me this shit. I'm like, I have no idea why this is important, but this is what I'll never forget. As I'm talking to him, he's doing this to my chest. Like his head is in my chest. He's going like this. Yeah. And instead of very calmly asking him what he's doing, I spin around and I'm still talking to Tucker and I yell, what the fuck are you doing? But I time it incorrectly so that what the fuck are you doing comes out as I spin around to face the street and look at two Mexican nationales with fucking machine guns who are staring at the two of us and wondering what we want. And I freeze. And William fucking Tucker pushes past me and goes, listen, and just starts with these guys. I know you two guys are in on it. And here's the thing, I don't even fucking care. I don't know who told you what was going on. I don't know why you can't sell these to me, but I'm here to tell you, man, we're going to fucking wreck this fucking town if we don't get what we want. And these two cops look at me, look at him, hands on their machine guns, and go, come with us. And the guy grabs my epaulette on my leather, and another guy grabs Bill Williams, and I think they're taking us to a car, and they walk us across the street, and we go into another pharmacy because the whole street's lined with them. These guys march us to the fucking counter. One guy puts his gun down on the counter. The other guy still has his gun. Tucker and I, neither one of us know a word of Spanish, which is also fucking rude, right? The cop is talking to this guy, and it's a million miles. It's a million miles. And Tucker is like basically like, yeah, yeah, like he's agreeing with whatever this cop is saying to this pharmacist, right? But we have no idea what he's saying. I am under the impression that he's like, did he try to buy drugs here? Because if he did, we're going to take him out back and shoot him or put him in jail. That's where I'm at. Tucker is like, I'm with the cops. That's it. Cop turns around to me and goes, how much money do you have? And I'm still like, that's it. They're going to steal our money and then they're going to kill us or put us in jail, whatever. Boy, is Martin going to be mad, right? I had like $700 fucking dollars. So I'm like, so the guy takes it. He takes $100. He fucking hands the guy $600. The guy takes out a fucking paper shopping bag like you get at Christmas and like swipes the fucking counters, shelves clean, fills the shopping bag up. The cop hands it to me. And Tucker's like, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? I go, shh, 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 shh. They walk us to the fucking door of this place, and the cop says, do not go into that bag until you get back to your hotel. If I see you reach into that bag while I'm walking you to your hotel, you understand what's going to happen to you, right? I'm like, yes, sir. So we're walking, and they walk us down the street, and it's like, well, 4 blocks. Their car's back there. They're walking us to our fucking hotel. They don't want us in the car. I mentioned how bad we smell, right? They don't want us in the car. We get and Tucker the whole time is just, I told you, man. I told you. These guys, they're on our side. They're not part of it, man. But everybody else part of it. So not now. Here comes the beauty of this. 2 things. One, Tucker won't shut the fuck up, and we're this close to being murdered in Tijuana. And 2, he is such a fucking personable fucking muppet that these 2 cops that have decided to take pity on us are now, they have no idea what the fuck he's talking about, but they're like, yeah, yeah, we're on your side. They are now all in on the William Tucker team. They get us to the hotel, and I say to the guy, they're like, yeah, they're all over Tucker, man. They're shaking his hand. They don't hug him, but they pat his. And the guy goes, okay, please don't cause any trouble while you're in Tijuana. Any more trouble while you're in Tijuana. And like an idiot, I go, I got to ask why'd you help us? And the guy goes, there was 2 things I was going to do. I was going to get you drugs, or I was going to kill you. And it's too hot for me to fill out all that paperwork. And just turned and walked away. I look at Tucker, and Tucker's like, let's go in the bag. We went upstairs and whatever. But I'm serious. These 2 cops just like, yeah, you know what? He's right. There is a conspiracy against William Tucker, and it's happening here in Tijuana. It was fucking amazing. I mean, what the fuck?
Here's another guy, and I'm sure there are many different people in this one person. I've encountered 2 versions of this guy. Okay. The first version is a drunken, cool uncle who you just want to be around because he's funny, he's engaging, but very, very intoxicated. The second version of this guy is sober, focused, and fucking scary with how smart he really is. When he doesn't have the other shit going on, sharp as a goddamn tack. You know who I'm talking about. Elaine Jorgensen. Whoa.
Wow. How much time do we have? So yeah, so here. Yeah, you're 100% correct. That is a perfect description. I I don't know, but John, Louis, I talk to guys every once in a while. It seems like he's more the guy you want to be around nowadays, right? The guy you can't wait to fucking have a conversation with. When people ask, that's funny how you put that because, you know, okay, all right, sorry, sometimes I get in my own way. So Al's one of those people that I get to meet before he's famous, right? He's just a guy who hangs out at Exit. He's doing a thing and it's just wax tracks and he's trying earnest as fuck, right? And a nice guy, smart. Um, then it turns into hanging out a little bit. And what I tell this to people, it's part of the next book, right? But I tell this to people all the time, and unless you're in the music business, like you'll get what I'm about to say. It'll make sense. The feeling will make sense to you. I think. I think. I hope it does anyway. Uh, when I say it to my musician friends that are strictly musicians that don't do any kind of production or writing about it or anything else, they play. They don't get it at first, and then it takes a second for them to think about it, and then they're like, "Okay, yeah, you're right." Right? When I tell the same story to all my production friends or my writing friends or people that work in bars, they all get it right away. So I guess it comes from that place. So it goes like this. Uh, I am like the fucking Forrest Gump of punk rock, industrial music, and grunge to some degree, right? And I say that with all due respect and love because it goes like this. There are not, and again, this is not a brag. It's just the fucking shit I fell into that I'm so lucky for, right? There are distinct lines between parts of every scene. The scenes that I'm in are the ones I can talk to. Scenes I was in are the ones I can talk to. But I know, power pop guys. I know straight up blues guys. I know jazz guys. It's the same fucking thing to some extent. It goes like this. Guy who works in a nightclub can be your friend when you play there, and he can be your friend when you hang out there. But he doesn't come to the studio, right? And you might put him on a guest list, but you don't really have a lot to do with him during a show. Guy who comes to the studio is your friend. Maybe he's going to be on the road when you go on the road, so that's it. But then when you start to ask his opinion about stuff or you start to involve him in things, it gets a little deeper than that. Guys that you take on the road, you might just hire them for being on the road. You don't see them in the bars. They don't hang out the studio too much. They're hired to carry your gear and set your gear up. Tour managers don't really hang out with you in nightclubs unless you're on tour and they're babysitting you. They definitely don't do it before. They don't go to the studio much unless it's to meet you, right? For business. They don't hang out for 2 or 3 days in the studio. And they definitely don't, when you're on tour, they're just in charge, right? So there's some lines that are delineated. They hardly ever cross. I've been lucky enough that those lines are completely blurred. I don't have that. I hung out with Al before he was famous. We were just friends from the bar. We weren't even tight. And I liked him a lot. But then he was like, "Why don't you come to the studio and hear what I'm doing?" It's like, what the fuck? You don't even really think about that, right? And then it's like, "Why don't you come hang out?" And then let's do some stuff that's not bar related. Let's. it it's a very weird thing that I have, that I've been the guy at the club you hang out at. I've been the guy who hangs out with you at the record studio, recording studio, and I'm a guy that goes on tour with you. I'm a guy that is your security guy sometimes. Sometimes I'm the guy in charge of the money. Sometimes I'm both. It's very, very weird, right? And it's part of getting to be a tour manager, but not that's not the road most people take. Brian James Dickey is probably the only other guy I know who can do that out of all the guys I know. There are guys that I worked with that were way more talented than I am in lots of things that would never be allowed to hang out at a studio with somebody, or wouldn't even be thought of to be good. Yeah, I'll take you on the road, be a crew. It's just whatever, right? So the Al thing goes like this. When people ask me about it because it's so weird, I I say, uh, they're like, wow, what's that? And it's like there's a lot of it, there's a lot going on, right? But it's like you will never have more fun in your life than going on a bender with Hal Jorgensen, unless it's recovering from a bender with Hal Jorgensen, sitting around eating good, great food, talking about where the food comes from, how it's prepared, whatever, and then playing chess for 20 hours, completely sober,
Right.
because those are both that guy. And people say, oh, well, I worked for him, I did this. And then it's like, as far as I know, I have never had a fight with Al Jorgensen, not ever. I never worked full time for a full tour for him because it's just with timing and stuff. The tour that I was going to go on with him was the one that got canceled, and then Killing Joke and Pigface happened, right? Well, part of being the guy who gets to work at Smart Bar Metro because it's the coolest club in Chicago, and then hanging out in the studio and then being on tour with bands is sometimes you don't get the politics of how that is going to piss someone off. I had no idea. There was no tour. Then there was a tour that I could go on, and then there were hurt feelings. But then when I saw Al, he wasn't mad at me. It wasn't like I was a member of the band. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, well, I was really counting on you. It was more like, oh, Stevie, and he calls me Stevie, or used to call me Stevie all the time, which only my grandmother does. And he'd be like, well, Stevie, I was kind of pissed because you were on the road and we went. But, you know, that wasn't even a fight, right? That was just whatever. Um, I have nothing, nothing but good things to say about Al because, you know, anyone can say whatever they want about how they would handle something differently, but fuck you. Until it's you, you don't know. I'm not supposed to be this old. I'm supposed to be fucking dead somewhere, right? And I got sober and I'm okay. Not everybody needs to get sober to be okay. I did, but um, but even if you're not sober, fuck you. No one gets to dictate your intake on anything, right? As long as you're not intentionally hurting somebody, you're okay. And sometimes when you take things, you do intentionally hurt people. But again, there's no excuse. Oh, he's an artist. This, that. I've never seen Al fall back on any of that. If Al was an asshole, Al will tell you the next day he was an asshole and he'll give you a full throated apology. He won't fucking mince around and go like, well, you know how it is. Never, 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 never. He's like, hey, man, I was out of line. Or, hey, sorry, I got fucked up. I don't really remember what I said, but I know it was shitty. Whatever. He's always there with it. And not in a oh, I'm going to play the game and pretend to apologize, like full on worried about hurting your feelings, you know. And I once in the studio, Mike was playing a guitar thing for him, and he kept telling Mike to play it differently. He had 24 tracks going, right? 24 different. And this fucking guy, high as a kite, up for days, hits playback on everything else, and literally, without even no headphones on, just listening to the drums, the other guitars, the bass, the vocal, every fucking thing getting into the mix. He just goes per second, right? He's got 24 tracks of the same fucking guitar riff and milliseconds he cuts. You stand there and watch that, and you're like, what the fuck? And then it's like, okay, well, he's just my pal Al, but he might actually be a genius. I mean, he might really be fucking, I mean, I think probably what has preserved our friendship is that, like, once I got sent to Boston to take care of stuff, and that's where I met Martin. So that was a terrible thing to taste or whatever. But I didn't expect to get paid or anything. It was just for a couple of weeks, and I was just gonna make sure he didn't die and make sure no one bothered him too much and all that. And then when I did the Killing Joke tour, Revolting Cocks were also in England, Germany. You know how that works where you see people all the time, right? And we were both staying at the same hotel in Birmingham by the Birmingham Top Rank, this really nice old hotel. And I hadn't seen Al since the Killing Joke thing started, and then he did the Repco thing, and uh, Paul Barker calls my room, and he's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm just about to go to bed." It's like 5 a.m. And he's like, "Yeah, he was." And again, I'm gonna say this sentence that I've heard a million times in my life. Listen, our tour manager quit. Alice down in the lobby causing a scene. Could you go down there? I'm like, what? He goes, I know you're not working for us. He goes, but no one can get him under control. I go, what's he doing? He's like, yeah, he's down. So I call down there, and there's this very nice, now younger than me, but at the time I would have sworn she was, in her 80s, very nice matronly woman at this old, typically English first class hotel, right? And I'm like, hi, Steve Silver with Killing Joke. I understand that we've got some guests from another band. And she goes, oh, God. She's like, there's two women here, and they won't stop saying that they have a room and they don't. And I'm like, well, do you want me to come down and take care of it? And she's like, they just keep saying, we're the Cockettes, and they won't stop saying it. I'm like, I'll be right down. So I hang up the phone, and I'm like getting dressed, and my phone rings, and it's the lady from the front desk. And she goes, and there's a man wearing boxer shorts and cowboy boots, and he won't leave. I also believe he's in the Revolting Cocks as well. And she hangs up the phone. And I go downstairs, and it's Al running around in boxer shorts. I'm like, the two women I don't see. I don't know if they went to a hotel room or whatever. And this poor woman and the poor man that are behind the desk are just recoiling in fear. And Al's just basically running around, and he's being that Al, right? So I just stand there. I'm tired. I'm fucking tired, right? I'm not going to play. And I don't want to go on the adventure, right? Because if I wanted to, then that would be a whole different story. I'd be like, hey, Al, let's go up to your room and do some drugs, or my room, do some drugs. Playtime's over. I got to get to bed. So I just stand there. He runs around. He's like, hey, Stevie. Now, has no idea I'm in town, right? Because they're playing the Birmingham Top Rank that night. We played the previous night, right? He had no idea. He didn't come to the show. He might have remembered, but whether he remembered I was with Killing Joke or not, who fucking knows? But he's running around a hotel in Birmingham, England, sees me, and goes, "Hey, Stevie." Runs around a little bit more, and he just stops. He's like, "What are you doing here?" And I'm like, "That's time he was married to Patty." And Patty sent me. She told me you're being an asshole, and I told her I'd come down here and get you and put you in your room. And he goes, oh, what are you going to do? I go, I'm going to get you, and I'm going to put you in your room. And if you don't go, I'm going to call Patty, and I'm going to tell her you wouldn't do it. And the fucking guy goes, okay. And puts, and we just walk to his room. I take his passport. and all his money. These are important things to hold on to. I go back and I get back into my room and I call Paul and I go, Paul, I go, I got his passport and I got his cash. He goes, oh, thank God. I go, we're staying here till whatever. I go, I'll stop at your room. What's your room number? So in the morning, I gave him his stuff back. But it's just funny. I'm just like, just matter of factly, I'm like, and to me, that's Al. I'm crazy. I'm going to run around in this swanky hotel in boxer shorts and cowboy boots until someone tells me to behave. And if it's somebody that I have to behave for, then I'll behave. I didn't work for the guy. I just was there. And it was, I mean, if I hadn't used Patty, if I just said, hey, these women are this woman and this man, they're trying to do their job, want to be left alone, he would have kept going. I just happened to, for whatever fucking reason, pull Patty out of the hat, right? And it was the perfect thing. And I think that describes Al a lot in that crazy, hey, Patty called from all the way over in Chicago. She, I know I shouldn't be here. You don't even, I'm like an illusion at this point. Your wife wants you to behave. Oh, okay. Head down, back to the hotel room. So, he's an enigma.
Yeah, he's a trip. I mean, the first time I encountered him, I got the crazy Al, like the fun Al. And
Right.
that was because I used to do a podcast years and years ago. And he had put out one of those like Buck Satan and the 666 shooters thing.
666 shooters. Yeah.
It was a charity for animal dog rescue.
Yeah.
And my wife at the time and I were, still are big dog rescue people.
Right.
So I contacted Al's people and said, I want to do an interview about this, dog rescue. So I got all these stipulations. Like if you mention this, Al's going to hang up the phone. If you do this, Al's going to hang up the phone. I'm like, all right. So I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. And it was his last interview of the day. So my phone rings. Angelina is on the other end. I guess that was wife number 2 or something.
Yeah.
And she's like, hey guys, this is the last interview. We were only going to do 20 minutes. Al wants to do the full hour with you because he loves the fact that we're going to be talking about dogs. You got him for an hour at least. Al comes on and he's, but he's like, listen, I don't give a shit about my new album. I don't care about ministry. I want to talk to you and your wife about dogs.
Yeah.
So that's what we did. We talked, and every time I brought up ministry, he's like, whatever, fuck ministry. I want to talk about dogs. And he was the sweetest guy, obviously in a different state of mind at that point. But I'll say this, I was the host of the show, so I was leading the discussion. If it went a few minutes without my wife chiming in, Al would ask her a question.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he made sure that she was involved in the conversation. So I'm like, even though he's crazy, he was inclusive. Like wanted to make sure everybody was part of the thing.
Yeah.
So that stood out for me. Then I talked to him years later for another interview. That's when I got serious, together, and fucking frightening Al. I mean,
Yeah.
I could hear the gears spinning in his head. Amazing guy.
He one time he says or at Exit, I'm working at Exit. Ministry's making a little bit of money, but not really. Like they're getting fucked somehow, right? He goes, hey, I'm gonna do a thing, but I'm gonna do it here for 3 days. I'm like, cool. He goes, I want you to work the door. Don't let anybody else work the door because that's going to be how we get paid, just off the door. You don't owe me any money. Just pay me the $3 per person to get in, right? Good old punk rock bar holds like 750 people, packed, right? I'm like, okay. It's like a miniature version of Rock Garden. Figure Rock Garden just like it was in a neighborhood, right? Rock City Gardens. I mean, just tiny cement building, but it was in a kind of a nice neighborhood, which was weird. But so I'm like, okay. I go, what are you going to do? And I just thought, and I got to tell you, what kind of X was I think Albini would play there all the time, touring band. Misfits played there. Loudest show fucking ever, by the way. Misfits played there. Uh, Tons of people played there before they were big. But then the just great Chicago group of people played there all the time. Albini, everybody played there, right? Breaking Circus was like it's amazing. So I'm like, what are you gonna do? And I thought he was gonna do like an electrified version of Dylan, right? Like he was gonna bring a guitar, maybe a little keyboard and play. He goes, I don't know. But I need you to be here at 10 o'clock on Thursday in the morning, right? I'm like, fuck. So I open it's everything. It is fucking everything. It's keyboards, it's drums, it's guitar, and it's a small stage. He's got everything jammed in there. He's got lights. I'm like, what the fuck? He called it Garden Weasel. And now I don't know if you are aware of this commercial. Do you know this commercial? It might just be a Midwestern thing. Back when there were not that many channels, there was a infomercial, a commercial that would run all the time. And it was a guy would talk over pictures of basically older people doing gardening. And this tool had two handles, and you put it in the ground and had forks, and you just twisted it. It was an aerator, but they called it the Garden Weasel. So it was like, your tomatoes will grow 6 feet tall with the garden weasel, and a garden weasel, a garden weasel, a garden weasel, over and over and over. So he says, we're going to call it the garden weasel because I can't use my name. I can't use Paul's name. I can't use anyone's name. I can't use ministry. There's a lawsuit and I need cash. And like a fucking idiot, I go, well, who's going to fucking come see Garden Weasel? He's like, and he looks at me and he's like, yeah, no one, unless I like tell somebody tells them that Garden Weasel's actually ministry and you can see us for $3. I'm like, oh, me. He goes, yeah. And I got Sean Joyce over at Wax Tracks telling people, hey, and there's like they made one fucking flyer at Kinko's. It was just a picture of the Garden Weasel. It's like live for 3 nights, Garden Weasel, $3 exit. So Sean Joyce tells everybody. I tell everybody that comes to exit, and the place is fucking packed for 3 nights. And he made a few grand, whatever. But it was like, I can't use my name, can't use anybody else's name. I can't use the name of the band. This happened several times. That's where Alien came from.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't allowed to use Al or Alan on any credits on a record for something for the next thing. So he had to come up with something. So he came up with Alien, which is actually pretty smart. But it's like, I can't put Al, I can't put Alan. It has to be Alien Jorgensen because I don't have a contract under that name. This guy figured out the money end of the music business way before anybody else and would tell people that he's like, this is how you get more money to opening bands, right? Or to like just anybody. Somebody would be in the studio and they're like, well, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I would be at tracks and people would be like, and you can come to the studio from like 3 to 5 to 6 a.m. It's a lot cheaper because no one's using the studio then. So the studio will rent it to you for a lot less, right? So tracks, we had a lot of that. And I would see Al take people out of Studio B and just go, no, fuck that, come here. And put new tape in and let them, like, if he liked them, if he just liked how he was talking to you at the fucking coffee machine, he was going to produce your single and just brought you in and was like, boom. And they're like, well, he's like, no, don't pay me. Don't pay producers. Producers make too much money. He's like, but you can tell people I did it, and I will tell people that I did it. I will admit that I did it, but you can't put my name on it. You can't promote it like that. But you can fucking tell everybody that I did it. And he would pay for the tape. He'd pay for the fucking time, and he'd just go, here we go. because he's like, I know that it's hard. You know what I mean? And I mean, I think that we're lucky that probably like your stuff with, the guys from Black Sabbath, right? Those guys still get it, right? It's fucking hard. You know what I mean? That is what separates a real band or a real musician from half of the fucking shit you see, right? And it's like, oh, it's not hard for me anymore, so fuck everybody else, right? And then there's people that are like, it's hard. I'm going to help you, right? And I can help you because I can. Because the $50,000 I'm spending for a week's lockout on Studio A is already spent. How about I spend 2 hours doing your shit and maybe it'll click something in my mind for my shit? Who knows? And that's how he would always say it to people. He goes, you're doing me the favor. He was just being a nice guy, right? But he got because he's so fucking smart. He got contracts and money, and I don't care who it is, get it in writing down way before anybody else. I mean, I love Jim Nash and I love Wax Tracks and I love Danny and I love that whole thing. And a huge part of the charm of the Wax Tracks label is they were just like, well, just do whatever you want, right? And we'll pay for it. And we'll see what happens. Which it's kind of like the factory out of Manchester. Fucking genius, right? But again, I never had a contract with Wax Tracks. They were just my friends. I'm not a musician. Those guys should have been fucking billionaires, right? They didn't get what they had coming, and they gave the foundation for everybody. They really fucking did. And when you talk to most of the guys that we know, like you talk to Mars and Frankie, they're like, fuck, man, Jim told me just here, go to the studio, I'll pay. Right? Go do this, I'll make this record, I'll do this, whatever. You know, Sasha, yeah, Jim will put us out when no one else will put us out. I mean, you know, I know everybody knows Wax Tracks, but fuck, dude, those guys gave away way more than they ever got back. But the beautiful thing is they didn't fucking care. Not one bit did they fucking care, right? It didn't matter to them one second. The fact that to his last fucking J, Jim Nash should be able to say to somebody, yeah, Ministry, Thrill Kill Cult, Revco, Thousand Home, I got people in the middle of nowhere records that sounded like that to make them feel like they weren't alone. I mean, that's all I care about. I think that's fucking amazing.
I'll tell you what, nature's calling me right now.
Yeah, I make people pee a lot.
So here's what we're going to do. I'll
Okay.
step away for a minute.
All right.
We're going to improvise live like a motherfucker on this video.
Oh, nice.
When I come back, we're going to keep the discussion going. And
Okay.
I'm not going to check what you say until I post the video.
Nice. I like that.
3, 2, 1, go for it.
All right. So what Joel doesn't know. So anyway, so let me tell you a story about Joel because he won't let me tell you this while he's here. I swear to God, we didn't set this up. Joel's the kind of guy who knows everybody and has been everywhere, but will never tell you that. Like the stories I'm telling you right now, like he's like, yeah, well, when I met up, but he doesn't say, oh yeah, well, I know Paul, well, I know Sean, I know, but he's not jumping in on that, and I get that. But the thing about Joel is when I met Joel, like it's Pigface, and we're just doing our thing, and he just walks up and he's like, hey, and I'm like, fuck, that's Joel. Now I know who he is because of the Pigface history and all that stuff, but he doesn't know me because I wasn't in Pigface. I wasn't doing anything at that time that he was in Pigface. I just happened to know the history of it. So I'm like, here's a prime opportunity for a guy to be a total shitbag. Like, well, this is who I am, and because I write, and this guy's a successful paid writer, and I'm not. I'm like, okay, here it comes, and just regular conversation. how you doing? What's going on? Oh, you wrote a piece. You're going to read a story. That's cool. You know, there are people in this world that say they're supportive, and then there are people that are supportive. And Joel's one of those people who probably doesn't really say he's that supportive. I mean, I don't really see him saying it that much, but constantly promoting friends, promoting ideas, promoting other people's bands, promoting other things. That's a fucking big thing. And I
Hey,
hope
hey,
it doesn't get too big when he hears this. Hey,
hey,
I
hey.
was just I was just talking about having sex in Yugoslavia in the dressing room during the Killing Joke tour,
Nice. As one does.
as one does. That's actually a really good story that I'll tell you sometime. Because
Well,
I actually told it at the museum. It's one of the few stories that I've told at the museum with Martin, because Martin and I do that thing, where we trade stories, but we don't know what each other's saying. That story came to me while he was saying something. And like Suzanne Shelton, who's like the coolest DJ in the world, she started Neo, and she's just cool. She's another like this amazing mind full of politics and caring and human kindness, and just I've had a crush on her since I was probably 19, right? She's in the audience, sitting there. She supports the museum. Brian James Dickey's there, and he's laughing during the whole thing. And I just tell this story about when we were in Yugoslavia and being tour manager, and I want the food and all this. And Martin's looking, and it's like, this is a story Martin has never heard. I'd never told this story before to anybody. It just came to me, right? A memory. And it ends up with, having sex with whatever. And how Martin and I work is when you're done, you just go, okay, right? And you come up. And it's really hard sometimes to follow each other. So I think sometimes we try to tell stories that are like fucking just emotionally ringing. You're like a wash rag when you're done hearing Martin's story, right? And then he's like, and now Steve will tell you a story about having sex or something, or doing drugs at the Eiffel Tower. And it's like, fuck, how do you follow that? So I told that story, and I turned to Martin to do the whole your turn, and Martin is like frozen. And I'm like, yes, I win. And I was like, yeah.
well, we got to do this,
All
Paul.
right. What are we doing?
And we got to, we'll get through it together.
Okay.
But, my one of my whole reasons to do this video series is, obviously celebrate people who are still here, but we got to celebrate those who aren't. And,
Right.
it's been a week now. Um, you know, so we got to talk about Jordy.
Okay.
Uh, why don't we do this? Why don't we do this? A short, fun, happy memory, and then we'll carry on. Sound good?
Yeah. Here, remember kids earlier in the program when I talked about walking in with a gang to a gig? I'm going to tell you a short, it's not that short, but I'm going to tell you a Jordy is my gang leader story that is badass that I like to tell. It's a fun story. Want to start there?
Sure.
Okay. There's two sides of this. I'm going to tell you the great part. So, getting back to being a tour manager, I know that 75% of the people that are listening to this are going to go, yeah, to what I'm about to say. And 25% of people are going to go, what the fuck are you talking about? But it goes like this: promoters never want to pay you. So you go in and they're like, yeah, there's no money. It's like, come on, dude. And this is a dance that goes around. Sometimes they have bouncers in there to try to scare you. And I think part of why I did so well was I could go in there and, what? We're going to have a fist fight. I had 3 fist fights a night for 5 years before I got this job on the street where I could get my head banged into concrete. I'm ready to go. Let's go. And they're like, okay, here's your money. So we're at this place in, oh, fuck. We're in England. And it's been an up and down financial. couple of days. There was one gig that we played that didn't do really well, but we could see that it wasn't even sold out, which was kind of crazy. And then there was a couple places where it's like, well, we wired all the money, and then the promoter's like, yeah, we got all the guarantee before you guys left to help pay for some stuff, so you don't have any money coming today, other than if you beat guarantee. There's like a couple days in a row of just roughing it, right? I mean, we were okay, but it was uh, everybody was kind of raw. Now at the time, Jordy was still doing the Armani suit thing. Do you know the Armani suit thing? Yeah, you do. Okay. Which I just love because anybody who remembers Jordy from the 80s, he's wearing a priest collar, and when he turns his back to the camera, it's whip marks all through there, all those welts, right? With the back, exposed back. And now I'm babysitting this guy who only smokes um, either Rothmans or Dunhills and has a gold lighter and speaks in a very, I don't know when it happened, but started speaking in this posh affectation, right? You know, and I mean, never dropped it. If he got, if there's about to be a brawl, it dropped. But other than that, he would keep that shit up, man. So we're at this place, and I want to say it's up north. It wasn't Liverpool, wasn't Hull, but it was up north. And and the offices were on the second floor. And it was a place that had those factory windows that go out. And the offices had those windows. And we got the bus parked, and there's this huge line of people. It's packed. So now we're like, yes, we're happy. It's like 2 in the afternoon, and it's just packed with people. This chick was, I go upstairs, I get the money, I come back to the bus, and I tell everybody to come out. That's how you do it. No one leaves the bus until I get the money. That's how it works. You don't unload, everybody sits around, drinking, smoking, talking, whatever. And you get kind of antsy because the longer I'm up there, the more shit's probably happening, right? So I'm up there a bit, and the guy's like, no, no, nah, fuck off. I'm not paying. I'm like, well, we're not gonna get out of the and opens up his drawer, and he pulls out this gun, and it's a fucking like an antique, you know, but it's still a handgun. And I'm like, and as I'm thinking up my next move, I hear footsteps behind me, and I assume it's one of his guys, and it's Jordy. And Jordy has not fucked around. Like on the bus, he's got a t-shirt hanging out. He's full fucking Armani suit. He's got the black shirt. He's got the gray. He's got the fucking pocket square. Holding his gold lighter. Uh, oh, chaps, a problem. And I'm like, they don't have any money for us. Oh, no money, eh? Well, that is a bit of a sticky one. Yeah, he's doing the whole fucking thing like he's seen every Noel Coward movie in the world. And I'm just watching, and the guy's like, yeah, no. It's like, fuck off, man. No, you don't get paid till after you play. I don't have the cash. Oh, I see. He walks over to the window. He pushes one of the windows open, and he turns around, and he goes, how much do you suppose it would cost you to replace all the panes of glass in your front windows? Let's find out, shall we? And he goes to the crowd, and he goes, hello, hello, you lovely people. And everybody's like, Jordy, and there's got to be 500 of them. He goes, listen, we would love nothing more than to give you Killing Joke show. And I'm looking and I see Chaz, Martin, Raven, they're all looking through the fucking windshield of the fucking tour bus up at us, right? They're like, what the fuck's he doing? He's like, I would nothing more that I would love than to give you a show. Unfortunately, the gentleman in this office who owns this building says that he cannot pay us. And while we hate to bring money into the equation of giving you this show, it is a necessary evil, my loves. Which I love that line. It's a necessary evil, my loves. I was wondering if any of you could do me a favor and pop over there across the alley and grab a couple of those stones and put them through these windows. Jordy throws the cigarette out the window, takes another cigarette out of the fucking fancy box, takes the lighter, always had the head cock, does the walks over. I think he's going to walk over next to me, right? The guy runs over, looks out the window, sees that the windows are getting smashed, comes back, sits at his desk. Jordy jumps up and is standing. Uh oh. Lost us there. Standing on the guy's desk. Kicks the fucking gun like a Western movie across the thing, bends over at the waist and is in this guy's face. And he goes, son, that is only the first thing I thought of doing. Give us the fucking dosh. And the guy reaches into the desk and there's an envelope, had it the whole fucking time, hands it to Jordy, and Jordy goes, no, 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 no. Hand it to my tour manager. That's his job. Jumps down off the desk, walks downstairs, gets back in, and before I can get down with the envelope, it's told everybody, all right, fellas, unload. Steve's getting the money. Just jump right up on the desk, bend over in half. Fucking $3,000 Armani suit, not a hair out of place. No, no, no. Give it to my tour manager. That's his job.
Fucking extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. That was nuts. He yeah. It was one of the blessings I have of not being a musician is I don't have that dynamic of being in the band. I'm with the band, right? I'm part of the gang, but I'm not in the band. I know that it's super fucking easy when you're creative. And I mean, you know, you're a writer, like, you know, I don't want to say like me because you're successful at it, but we're writers. It's fucking hard, right? Now imagine if the only way you could write something was to have three or four other people do their version of the same thing at the same exact time. And you're a musician, so I 100% know you get it. But the capacity for vindictiveness and shittiness is unparalleled, right? I got some of that from everybody because that's my job. I'm the guy. People are gonna yell if I fuck up for sure, but a lot of times just in general, I'm the guy they're gonna yell at. A lot of the time because they don't want to yell at the guys in the band, right? But they got to have somebody who at least gets it. But I can't speak to dynamics of that. I can speak to knowing that Jazz is one of the hardest people in the world to get along with, as is Jordy to some extent. And those two motherfuckers never stopped being in a band, right? Together. That's pretty amazing. And I will say this I have seen, and it's nobody's business to hear the whole story, but I'm going to tell you something that Martin will back up 100% whenever you talk to him. And Jazz would too if you ever talk to him. I have seen in a dressing room before or after a show, when it's those four guys, just be the most brutal towards each other, right? But, and this is probably going to come as no surprise, Martin and Raven were usually ones making a point, right? And Jazz was usually no, no, no. The normal inclination would be to think, okay, well, Jordy and Jazz are like this. There's no way around that. You're not going to get Jordy to break off from Jazz on any kind of argument, I think. The look of caring and concern and love, there's no other word for it, and respect that Jordy would give Raven and Martin when they were top volume making their point about how something was wrong is something I will never forget. I've seen it a few times with other people, a lot. I've been lucky enough. But I have to say that even in his contentious moments, Jordy had an aura about him or a way. I don't even fucking know how to put my finger on it. It wasn't hurtful and it was never meant to be hurtful. Now, maybe that's just mine, but I was around the guy for a couple of years, right? And in some pretty intense moments. And the capacity to be able to fight with half of your band, basically, and up to and including, let's just say this is the last gig we're going to play and fucking go our separate ways. And not to give in, not to go, yeah, yeah, yes, slow down. We're going, don't do that because we need to do this for money. It was always like, well, if you want to do that, we can. But do you really think that's, and I mean, always had the capacity to make, if even if he wasn't making a counterpoint in a kind way, he was paying attention to your argument in such a kind way, in such a, and I get, you fucking think about this guy. This guy was a fucking hardcore headbutting motherfucker in his youth, right? I mean, this was a guy people crossed the street from. And there he is, before we even called it this, practicing kindness. You know what I mean? Like, I, you could see him seeing someone else's pain and just letting them have that space and kind of being like your parents, like you can say what you want, I'm always going to love you. You know what I mean? Martin says, when you talk to Jordy, it was always, country before band, and it's like, yeah, Raven said it too, I think. But that Jordy had a sense of danger about him. And I can tell you stories that are great about him taking me out after hours and stuff and all that stuff. He had a sense of danger that was earned, but and people are saying, it's been a week, right? And people are saying, yeah, one of the most dangerous bands in the world, da 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 da. This guy created all these riffs, just the sound, and that's all true. But not a lot of people are saying one of the most important things, which is here's a guy who is literally, no hyperbole at all, a rock guitar fucking god to a generation of people. The first Killing Joke record is one of the first records that I wore out. And people are talking about all that, but nobody's talking about the fact that this guy was as down to earth and as fucking kind and as nice and as fucking just wonderful as you could possibly fucking hope for. I mean, he had a way of, oh, well, oh boy, none of it matters in the end anyway. That sounds completely stupid coming out of my mouth or anyone else's. But just the way he said it was like this existential dread just disappeared. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, everything's gonna be all right. We got on a flight. I got on a TWA flight at the time. TWA was the most bombed airline in the world. And it was the first Gulf War, and we were flying back to London, and the war had just kicked off. And they put us all in first class because nobody was on the plane. Nobody. They had to fly the plane because it was filled with stuff, right? And everybody had canceled their flight except for us and a family that sat in back. They didn't want to come up to first class. They were on the plane before we got on the plane. Didn't see them. And this, you could still smoke on planes back then. So we're smoking and we're drinking, and they're like, and I know you're going to find this hard to believe that stewardesses might fawn over all these guys in Killing Joke, but yeah, it's true. They did. So it's basically like, oh, there's a 2-bottle limit, but don't worry, we're going to give you whatever you want because there's no one else on the flight. It was 8 of us and the people in back. And we're getting ready to taxi. We're taxiing. We're getting ready to go. And loudspeaker comes on, and swear. Now, keep in mind, it's like Smith. Okay, it's just like the name Smith. Would Mr. and Mrs. Hussein please come to the front? There's an issue with your luggage. Very nice middle-aged man and his wife walk up. The kids come with them. They're in their teens, probably in college. Yeah, okay. So one of the guys is like, did they say Jazz? Goes, hang on, is that last name Hussein? Jordy looks at her and goes, yes. Oh, chaps, I don't know how to tell you this, but I think it's the end. And I go, stop it. He goes, no. It's not the end because they're terrorists. It's the end because this is absolutely the funniest fucking way we could all die. I was just like, that's how I want to go out. I want to go out, Killing Joke, and the Hussein family crash in the middle of the ocean. That's funny. I mean, it's just, it's absolutely the funniest way we could go out. But it calmed everybody down. We're all just like, yeah, it's no big deal. So,
Fire from heaven.
what?
I said fire from heaven. Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Yeah. Oh, hang on one second. Actually, you got 1 second? I want to go grab something out of the other room and show it to you, speaking of Jordy.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I guess this is my turn to talk about Steve. One of the nicest, most genuine people you'll ever encounter in this life. Biggest heart. Bigger than all of Chicago. Steve fucking Silver. You're getting a real history here, folks. Even if my voice is trashed, Steve's isn't. Hello, Steve.
Hello. Yes, I'm wearing a Liverpool football shirt. Fuck you guys. Okay. So, I don't know if you saw, Martin did a thing, but the museum is kind of this catch-all. All these great things for post-punk and industrial and just in general. One of the times I went down there, I had the very first Wax Trax catalog in the mailer to my mom's house when I was on tour. It came out and it said Steve Silver, and it had my mom's address on it in Aurora, Illinois. And Brian Brain had a couple singles in that catalog. It was kind of cool. And it was just typewritten, 8 pages. I found it right before I was going down to do a thing with Martin. So I put it in my case. I have just a ton of shit everywhere. Like not as much as him, but I find stuff all the time, right? It's really weird. Stuff kind of finds you. And it was Raven's. It was the anniversary of Raven passing, so we were going to do a thing about Raven. So I was like, well, I'll bring you this for the museum because you're putting stuff up. And I had a couple other things. I had some really cool, but one of the things from that thing was while I was on tour with Raven, I'd gotten all this stuff from Warner Electric and Electra, and they had sent me all this stuff branded to this place in New York that Raven and I were staying at. So I gave it to Martin. And I said, oh, and I found this. And I pulled the catalog out and I'm flipping and I go, look, Brian Brain, because they did it alphabetically, right? And I hand it to him and he goes to look at it and this postcard from Wax Trax, well, plugger falls out. And he's like, what's that? I'm like, well, I don't know. So I grab it and I hand it to him, and it's the Wax Trax thing. It's an orange postcard. And on the back is Paul Raven's handwriting. It's his girl, Gerda, in Brazil, in Germany. It's her address. And he's like, hey, and it was from the Pigface tour. He was like, or Killing Joke. He had to go do something with Prong or something. I can't remember. He left Killing Joke. Killing Joke ended. Pigface was about to start, and in between, he had to go somewhere and do something. He's producing something or something. It's like, hey, if there's any money for me, can you mail it to this address for my kid? And being who I was, I just took all the loose bills and stuff, put them in a fucking box, and mailed them because I'm an idiot. But I hadn't seen that thing since the day I mailed it, which was, 30 years ago, right? So Martin and I started fucking freaking out, and then we had to tell stories, and it was kind of crazy. So I tell you that to tell you this. You ever go to Lyon and play in France?
No, haven't had
Okay.
that.
Well, we'll get you there with Pigface. I'm trying to convince Martin that we have to do a world tour with Pigface because why not? Um, there's this, and for life I'll have to find it. It's buried somewhere, but the memory is fresh. So in Lyon, they have this. It's a gig that Killing Joke loves to play, but when you walk into it, it's like right there's a river through town. Go over the bridge. You walk in. At the time, it had these little motorcycles with the springs on them that used to be at the amusement parks, welded to the floor. It's this tiny little place. And I'm like, what the fuck? We walk in and I'm like, well, this is no good. And the guys in Killing, they've been there. So they know that in back there's this huge place. I just don't see it because from front it looks like a tiny dive, right? And I'm like, oh. He goes, and Jordy goes, no, 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 boy, this is a great place. They walk me around back and they show me. He goes, okay. And he goes, let's go have dinner. Let's go have a nice dinner. There's a great restaurant. Okay. He goes, everybody talks about Paris, but Lyon, the food here is unbelievable. So it's okay. So I go with them. We walk over the bridge. We go to this, it's kind of a downtown section. And it's this unbelievable restaurant. And they know him, of course, because he's there all the time. And we just had this fabulous meal. Wine. It's like it's the meal you would dream of eating in France, right? I don't eat beef or pork, but they had fish, they had like soup, whatever. So I mean, it was like gluttony. And I've got this great adventure. I'm sitting at a table with Jordy, just the two of us. We're having this great meal. We walk across, and he goes, "Oh, I have to stop at the tobacconist because I need cigarettes." I go, "Okay." Go. He buys a bunch of these, and he goes, I need to tell you, here's the thing you need to understand. He smoked on stage all the time. And part of the setup was pack of cigarettes. He had his lighter on him. He had a Dunhill gas lighter. And and vodka. And but I always carried a Zippo because I was a Zippo guy. I smoked a ton back then too, right? So, but sometimes he'd come over to the side of the stage and I'd have to light a cigarette for him because his fucking antique gold plated, didn't work. Especially when you're sweating. Right. And this thing was a finely made gentleman's lighter, really, right? You're not supposed to be carrying it around and banging into. So he says to me while we're tobacconist, he goes, I need you to know, I cannot stand that lighter that you use. Because he could taste the gas, he could taste the Zippo fluid. I'm like, okay. He goes, no offense, old boy. I'm sure it's fine for you. Which is a great insult, by the way. I'm sure it's fine for you. He's like, I'm sure it's fine for you. He goes, please, just don't. He goes, if I ever can't get my lighter to work, just take it from my hands and light my cigarette and then hold on to it and then stay there. And every time I need a light, you give it to me. Okay. So while we're there, I'm like, now, and as long as it told me to tell you that part of the story, in a millisecond of him telling me, take it from my hands, my thought was, not fucking bloody likely, right? It's never going to fucking happen. Never in a million years is this man going to hand me his lighter. It's just not going to fucking happen. So I buy a cheap lighter that looks like his lighter while we're there. And we play, and it's at night, and I'm all excited because I have surprise lighter in case I need it for him. And sure as shit, 4 songs in, whatever, he can't get a cigarette. He's looking at me, he's got the cigarette in his mouth. And I pull out a lighter and he looks at it and I light his cigarette. And he looks at it and he grabs it from me and he's like, cool, you bought a gentleman's lighter. You don't have that piece of shit. And of course, he's Geordie. He takes it and he puts it on his cigarettes on his amp, right? On the high watts. I'm like, okay, whatever. So going through shows going on. Backstage or back behind the curtains, but there's a spot between Phil, the roadie's coming to get me, and he's got Jordy's vodka because Jordy's vodka's done. He would bring a cold one from the dressing room and he'd bring it back. So he's bringing it. I go to meet him and he hands me the vodka, or he doesn't hand me the vodka. He's got the vodka in his hand, and we're talking just for a split second. He's like, "What the fuck is that with the cigarette?" And I go, "Oh, I bought this lighter, like an idiot. I'm telling the story while the band's playing 2 feet away. Like, I bought this lighter. It's like Jordy's, it's like a fake one." And he thought it was funny. Something hits the wall and falls behind us. I look, and he's like, "Vodka!" I go, "Whoa!" I grab it and I go around and I put it on thing and he drinks it, whatever. Show goes on. No big deal. Whatever. Break down the show, we load. And then Phil goes, "Hey, do you have that lighter that you bought?" I'm like, "No, I guess Jordy stole it." I'm sure he'll give it back to me. He wants me to hold on to it on the side of the stage so I can light his cigarettes. And, that's important. And he goes, "Yeah, I don't think so." I'm like, "Why not?" He goes, "Remember that thing that went flying by our head?" Like, yeah. And I think that was, I picked it up. I think that was it. I'm like, oh. So 5 days ago, I fucking found this. 5 fucking days ago. This. I mean, it's cheap. I think I paid $20 for it when I bought it. How fucking weird is that? So I got to give it to Martin, obviously, for the museum. But I mean, oh, shit's weird, right? I haven't seen that thing in fucking 20 years. More.
I used to have this ratty old phone book. I bought it when I moved to Los Angeles, and it's got maybe a good 10 years worth of phone numbers. Right before the pandemic, I sold my house and I was moving some boxes around. I hear boom, It's this old phone book I hadn't thought about in ages. Fucking hits the floor, opens up to Paul Raven's phone number when he lived in Portland.
Fuck.
So I'm like, okay, So I happened to mention it on Facebook. I'm like, I'm moving. This phone book hits the floor, and fucking Raven's number is there. And there's a guy you probably have seen around, Alex Smith, out in New
Yeah.
York. And he wrote, well, why don't you call it? He'll probably pick up.
Probably.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I mean, there's a lot of things with that band. They kind of come back and tap you on the shoulder every few years, like, hey, you know,
Yeah. It's a, you know, it was my first thinking punk band, right? Second, after Stiff Little Fingers. Stiff Little Fingers was political. Killing Joke was more of a all around. There was politics there, but there was other stuff. But I mean, you know, I've been stupidly blessed since I wrote the book, and then Riot Fest decided to have me open. I've opened for GBH telling stories like 3 times. There's another band, 79, they form. Somebody dies or just can't play anymore, they replace them, right? But the course has stayed a band since 79. Killing Joke, right? It's like we haven't stopped being a band. We might have taken some time off here and there, but we never broke up. Never, and it's like it's this juggernaut of personality, you know? And it's like Martin was in the band, Youth, Big Paul. I mean, fuck, who knows? John Bechtel was in the band. It's like they somehow, through all the dysfunction and acrimony and everything else, got like that thing I was talking about with Jordy. They got, we're a band. We're it, right? We're it. So we better fucking be it. And you can just be a fan and know that. You don't ever have to have been in the dressing room or had a talk with one of these guys. Just the sheer power of their magic, for lack of a better word. And I know with all the documentary and everything else, that's probably a bad way to go, but I don't care. The sheer power of the fucking magic of that band puts almost every other band less successful and definitely almost every band more financially successful to shame.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah. And the Raven thing on the shoulder, the Geordie, here's that fucking lighter I whipped at your head in Lyon in 1990. It doesn't fucking get, okay. This is going to sound sappy and I don't care. You know how when you were a kid and you thought everybody that was in a rock band was really cool and there was some sort of magic around it, right? And then you get to be around it and you kind of drop that, right? It's like, okay, it's a job, it is whatever. Okay, it's this, whatever. It changes once you're around it. Now, a fucking Killing Joke. Is that weird? Right? They're still, I mean, fuck, man. I mean, they're still magical
yeah.
individually and together. I feel it's so powerful to me that I know I should feel stupid for saying what I just said, and I don't feel a bit stupid about it. There is something to this coalition that brings lighters out of fucking nowhere, that drops a notebook and opens it for you, that puts a fucking note that you put in a Tracks catalog 30 fucking years ago. I've been married 30 years in April. I hadn't touched that catalog since I got married, right? there's Paul Raven's handwriting with his voice. And it turns out to be the son that he was sending the money to is the one who's the DJ that Martin was Killing Joke were raising money for so he could go do his thing, go to school. I posted a thing a while ago about Jim Ellison because one of my notebooks on the very front page says Jim Ellison, phone number, looking for a 59 gold top. Same fucking thing. That guy never lost his fucking magic. Not fucking ever. He might have gotten sad sometimes about the business, but he loved music and he loved being in a band, right? And you know, his the three of them together were an amazing, amazing band. They never be a band like that again, that good, I don't think, doing what they did. But Jim Ellison had that. He was my, again, another one of those guys. He was my friend who fucking went crazy because he got to use the Shoes studio in Zion. You know what I mean? It's like he was just like, he was my friend who hung out at the bars I worked at and talked to me about music before Material Issue was a fucking band. And he never won. And then I saw him after MTV and after fucking Spring Break and after fucking Liz Far and every fucking thing else. And he still had that glint in his eye when he talked about his guitar or his music or his lyrics or the next record. Fuck, man. We live amongst giants and don't even fucking know it sometimes.
I'm glad Jim came up because over Thanksgiving, that holiday break, I took a deep dive into Material Issue. I watched a documentary,
Good.
listened to those records, which are fucking peerless even now. I mean, my God, what a songwriter.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, going back to Killing Joke, I mean, look, and we're not going to get in the weeds about this, but I've known a couple of the members, let's say, well enough to where I'll sit there and think, you motherfucker, you're a fucking piece of shit. But
Sure.
but I will walk through fire for that band.
Yeah. Yeah.
That band has given me so much in my life. I can forgive certain people for being certain people,
Right.
And we'll talk offline about that sometime. But
We definitely will. Well, let me put it to you this way. There are two bands in the world that you could hear this conversation on the tour bus that make total sense. And they're Killing Joke and Pigface. And it goes like this. Hey, I really like the show we did tonight. You know what we need? Can we get some guy who breathes fire and rides a unicycle? We'll just have him do his thing on stage while we play. And it makes complete fucking sense.
right.
And it's like, that's not a joke. That's not we're doing it for the funny bit. I what does this rock show need? It needs a guy on a unicycle breathing fire. Yeah, it does. And then I'll go, yeah, that's 100% what this fucking thing needs. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, you can. Yeah, there's, what did Faulkner's friend say? He's like, it's William Faulkner, right? And the interviewer was like, yeah, but he was just da 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 this litany of shit that he did to the guy, right? And the guy goes, yeah, but he was my friend and he's William Faulkner. And if you don't understand that, take any one of his books off the shelf, crack it open to any page, read two sentences, and then tell me you'd be mad at that guy. And I was like, wow, that's pretty, you know, being an artist doesn't cover everything, but for these guys, it does. And that's pretty fucking immense. That's an immense thing. And the funny part is, from time to time, maybe they act like it, but for most time, they don't. You know what I mean? They're just fucking coming to work, man. They're coming to do the thing they like to do, and they're no more important than the guy setting up the stage or selling t-shirts or fucking out in the audience with a ticket. but that's why they call themselves the Gatherers, because that's what it is. It's a gathering. And it's not a gathering to watch the band, it's a gathering that the band happens to be playing at. And yeah, eh, I mean, granted, it's all because of the band, but the band doesn't look at it that way. And I
But
think that's fucking amazing.
and I'll say this as sort of a period to the Killing Joke conversation. There's a couple other points I want to get to you, get with you on
Okay.
that band. And I'll just make a statement and I'll let it sit there and then we'll move on.
Okay.
That fucking band brings out the most interesting women of any fucking band. I'll leave it there for now.
I babysat Guns N' Roses during the big tour. You are 100% correct. Embarrassingly, the difference. Everybody would think Guns N' Roses. No. Killing Joke. And I have to say, to some extent, because Pigface has kind of got a bit of that vibe, the amount of, yeah, yeah. I will put a period on it like that. I don't want to get any bad feelings, but
I mean,
yeah.
they'll burn your fucking house down, but it'll be an amazing time, you know.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I'm going to stab you in the neck with a shrimp fork. You'll almost die, but you are going to love the other parts of the time you spend with me.
Right. Yes.
Absolutely, I am.
Yes. Yes. Anyway, moving on.
Okay.
You have a book.
I do.
This might hurt a bit,
I do.
which I love, that you published a few years ago. Um, tell me a bit about the book and what led you to finally put some of these things down on paper.
Well, so I've always, oh, not always. By the time I got to junior high, high school, I started seeing that I've always been a reader, but before that even, but not discriminatory. I don't know. I just kind of whatever was given to me, I read. Junior high, high school, I start getting into some stuff, and then I discover the beat poets and the beat writers, and then I get into like Verlaine and some other stuff, and magically, like Patti Smith doing that, and television, and there's this music and literature thing that are going hand in hand. I have no musical talent whatsoever. I did start 77 Luscious Babes with Dirt, but that's a whole other story. Um, but something at some point clicked in me with reading Kerouac, especially, and I know everybody says this, but I don't care. I was like, I could do that. I could lead an interesting, I can live an interesting life, and then I can write about it. That's what I'm not going to make any money doing that. I'm going to have a job. It's going to take years because I'm not interested now. I'm a fucking high school kid who's boring, right? And then Johnny Cash turns me into a punk rock roadie, and I start on this adventure, right? My mantra during all the bars, all the bands, the tours, the hey, I'll go live in Japan for a while, see how that is. Hey, I'm going to go live in Ireland, adventures. The mantra during all of that was this is going to be great for the book, right? That was what I always said to myself. It's going to be great for the book. Uh, but, and thank God I was at least smart enough to make notes on things, right? Not always, but a lot of the time. And I still have them. But just things like itineraries. And then I start making notes on itineraries and this and that, whatever. And I wasn't even planning on, I mean, I just kept saying I was going to write a book, but had no real plans to write a book, right? I mean, just was like, okay, at some point I'll do that kind of thing. And I don't know, life gets however it gets. And then not preaching to anybody, but if anybody wants to know any more about it, they can reach out to me if they want. I don't care. My life's an open book, obviously. But getting sober helped me a lot. It saved my life. It's a blah, 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 whatever. But after a few years of being sober, I said, I'm going to write this book. Right. So then I started talking to people. And they're like, yeah. And they were all, I can't wait to hear about this tour. I can't wait to hear about Al. I can't wait to hear about conversations we're having. This is what people wanted to read, right? So I'm like, yeah, fuck yeah. I had to make a conscious decision at some point. It's like, I'm not going to tell stories that people that trusted me wouldn't want me to tell. So those are some of the best stories, but they're not, I'm not going to tell those stories. You and I can talk about them. That's a different story. I'm not going to publish a story. I'm not going to write a story about things that would hurt somebody or that somebody told me in confidence. To this day, it's 30 years later. I don't give a shit. That's not how it works. You got to honor that stuff that you said you would honor. It's just not right. But there's still a fucking metric shit ton of good stuff, right? So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to write that. And I kept doing a chapter, doing this, no particular order. And Lee Popa was like, hey, man, he sends me an email. You should write this book because, I got a manager who wants to read a book about the scene. And so I had 3 chapters and I sent it to him and whatever. And I wasn't happy with it. And I couldn't tell why I wasn't happy. I'm like, so I sent it. I sent it to Lee. Then I was like, kind of filling around. And my wife was getting ready to leave. She goes to see her sister and her wife, and Claudia takes her mom, and they go. She lives in Cape Cod. They do a Provincetown week or weekend with all girls, right? So Claudia was getting ready to do that, and I had time off, and I'm like, I said to her, but I knew when I said it, it wasn't going to happen, right? I'm like, I think I'm just going to write a bunch more stories, and when you come back, because my wife's an editor, and she's editor and proofreader for college textbooks in American history, and a researcher. And the company's closed now, but she's still, I mean, it's a skill set you don't forget. So, and she's working on writing too. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do this. And she says to me 2 things. She goes, I will edit it for you because I hadn't asked her to edit it. I was just going to send it to someone. She's like, I'll edit it for you because it's personal and you need to. She goes, you know, maybe you should tell stories that people don't want to hear that much. Like maybe your first book should be about how you got to where you're at. Maybe it shouldn't all be, yeah, I got in this fight. Yeah, I fucked this woman. Yeah, I fucked these women. I got in these fights. I had a heroin addiction. I had a cocaine addiction. Well, I know exactly how to mix the right amount of pills so you can stay awake for 17 hours straight. She's like, those are great. Everybody, and this is what she said. It was fucking genius. She's leaving, right? I mean, she's literally, I'm getting her to the airport. She goes, everybody's expecting that. So why would you give them what they expect? Great. And she goes, have 150 pages for me. She goes, have at least 100 pages for me when I get back in 5 days. And I did. I just sat and wrote. And it was about childhood and it was about music and there's a little bit of towards there about getting to work at Exit and stuff. But I had all these other stories, right? So I'm like, okay, so I'm going to write this. I'm going to put this out. It's kind of like the first 7-inch single, right? Let's see if people like it. Well, people really liked it, and then it got crazy. Like Martin had me read at the Knox Studios for the anniversary, and then the Pigface show. And that's right when the book came out. Right then, that like a couple months before that, right? So it's like this is it. We're done. Write this book. And he's like, tell some stories. And then Steve Albini posted a thing about, well, we used to go to VFW halls, and if my budget's $300, it's not $350, it's $300. And if I can't play at a regular nightclub, I'll just and I remember all those days. We used to go to the VFW, like you were saying, when you first booked. I will give you $200 to let me put a show. I'll pay you $200 to rent the top floor of the VFW hall because it had a stage and lighting and stuff, right? And you can keep the bar. Well, you're not going to get anybody here on Tuesday, and you get 500 people in there to see Big Black, right? Or Killing, I mean, or Naked Raygun or the Effigies. I mean, that's what we fucking did. you had to go places that weren't weren't the places you went. So I write the book, and people are telling me that they love it, and I start going to bookstores and saying, "Could I do a reading here?" And bookstores make money when they buy the book super cheap, and they can resell it, and I'll sign it. No, not interested. No, not interested. I'm like, wow, that's fucking hurtful. And then it comes to me. I have something nobody else who writes books has. I got friends who own nightclubs. So I called Dave Horniak, he's got a bunch of them, but Livewire and the Subterranea, and I'm like, hey, could I maybe like do a book reading? He's like, yeah, whatever. And now it's like this is the bar that Cheetah Chrome plays when he comes to town. So you get the vibe of what I'm talking about, right? He's like, sure. When do you want to do that? I'm like, I don't know. He goes, well, no one comes on Sundays, really. Could you do Sunday? I go, well, that'd be kind of early because I got up because I got to get up at 5 a.m. to go to work. Can I do it like 7 at night? He's like, fuck yeah, do whatever. So then I got Glenn Russell, Tom Payson, Bill Savely. I got these DJs that are killer. And then fucking Martin Atkins goes, you want me to DJ for one of your shows? I mean, so on top of that, right? So I have DJs that are amazing, that are just my friends I've known forever. Like, let me DJ during your reading. I'll play some music, get up, tell a story. I'll play some more music, tell a story again. Then I got other friends come and want to read from their books. I got a science fiction writer, Bill McCormick, who's got this epic trilogy of science. I mean, it's more than a trilogy now. He's got probably 20 different books. Some of them are graphic novels, some of them are books, and they're all science. It has nothing to do with what I write, but he's my friend from the old. He gets up and tells stories too. We sling books and sell T-shirts at nightclubs. Then I get art galleries that'll do it. Then like I got the fucking Waco brothers, and I do a show for them because I love the Waco brothers, but I've known Tracy for 35 years. I've known Alan for 35 years. I've known John for quite a long time. I've known Dean for a really long time. They just all happen to be in a band. That's awesome. You know what I mean? It's like a country western punk band. It's like, what the fuck? So that kind of takes off. And then Riot Fest. And I still do those from time to time. And then I have the huge collection of stuff, which I'm titling High and Outside, which is the story of a guy outside of everything who's high all the time. Duh! And it's got the baseball reference, which is about the stuff that I thought I was going to write about the first time, right? So I'm almost done with that. And God rest him, John Kesey passed away. And they have his service for him. And for those of you who don't know, John Kesey's lead singer and writer for the Effigies. One of the most amazing bands ever. And John and I were friends in and out of the band, anything else. Uh, John made no qualms about being very conservative politically, but I'm like, fuck you, you're John Kesey, you're my pal. We can talk about it or not talk. And I love talking to him because he's one of the smartest guys. It's like Al. He's one of the fucking smartest guys you would ever meet, and knew tons about everything, right? So it was good to talk. And it was always polite. It was always nice. It was always respectful. We never got loud. It was a good time. And that's something I value in my friends. I value in human beings in general. But he passed away. And I was like, well, I have to go to this service. So I put on the suit, went, and there's a lot of people from the state's attorney's office because that's where he worked. So it was a bunch of it. But then Chris Bjorklund was there, Paul Zamos from the band, John Moore was there from Deep Tunnel Project, from a bunch of other stuff, and the Haggertys from Pegboy and Naked Raygun, and Eric from Naked Raygun, and then so they had a stage and people took turns talking, and it was getting a little heavy on the lower release stuff. Chris had talked to him, so I got up and I told the story, and then I was like, a couple stories about John, and people liked it, and I was like, okay. I mean, it's a eulogy, so, but I wanted it to be nice and respectful. But I had to go out and get some air. The place was fucking packed. State troopers, state attorneys, punk rockers. It was a nutty. It was a typical Chicago guy wake, right? So I go out to get some air, and John Moore from Deep Tunnel Project had done a bunch of other stuff. Tar, great, just great guy. I've done him since 2020. Again, he's in a suit. I'm in a suit. He grabs my arm and walk out. He goes, "Hey," he goes, "You still had 20 more minutes in you, didn't you?" And we just started laughing, and it was kind of somber, even though we were talking. And I'm just like, "Yeah, I did." And I walked outside, and I'm like, "Okay, I got to go home because I got to write right now." I got in the car, and it was an hour to get home. And in that time, I'm like, "Okay, I'm keeping that book. That's still going to be a book." But it dawned on me, and I almost heard it in John's voice in my head, which was weird. But I'm like, you know, as I'm driving, I'm like, "You're a fucking idiot. You're sitting on something that, for whatever reason, you're afraid to do with your writing. And that is write a love story to Chicago like Nelson Algren or Studs Terkel, these great Chicago writers who write these books that don't even have to be, they're about the same size as my first book. And you get this sense. And then I went to Liz Phair, right? And I'm like, okay, Exile in Guyville, which is a song for song answer to the Rolling Stones record, right? But it's about Wicker Park in Chicago and being in a band. And I'm like, so this is all running through my head. And I'm like, you're sitting on this fucking thing. You sell more t-shirts than you do books. And your t-shirts just say, fuck you, we're from Chicago. I got the guys in GBH from Birmingham, England, all four of them wearing that shirt in a promo picture. You know what I mean? It's like, what? I have friends of mine from Second City and that are in some pretty heavy hitting movies. They're like, can I get a couple of those shirts and I'll pay for them? I'm like, what? Of course. But like, that's a sentiment that takes. And that's what I read in front of Pigface. And I'm like, you know what you're doing? This book, you're trying to make this whole thing of rock stars, bars. It's like, yeah, there is that. But I have a very specific thing besides all the other, that's Chicago. And it's not just Chicago, it's Martin, it's Alan from Jesus Jones comes here and he's in Waco Brothers. It's Tracy, it's all these guys that come from around the world to come here and they love it here, right? They love Chicago. And somebody needs to write a love letter to Chicago about our time. So I put High and Outside not on the back burner, but to the side for a little bit, and I'm making another size book the same as This Might Hurt a Bit, and I'm just titling it "Fuck You, We're from Chicago." And I don't care if anybody sells it. I don't care who carries it or who doesn't carry it. I'm printing it myself, making it, and it's going to be 100% Chicago music, bar, tough guy, love, booze, drugs, ode to Chicago in the late 80s and early 90s, which is the best fucking time there ever was to live in Chicago.
Fuck it. That's I can't wait. Can't wait.
That'll hopefully I'll have that out by January.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent. Can't wait, man. You know how much I love you guys out there. You know how much I love my Chicago family. So,
When you comment.
you're not the first person to ask me that lately.
Good.
I had Martin King on.
I know, I watched it.
Right. And he's like, if you fancy coming to London, you can play with us again. And I had two people from LA on who were like, when are you coming back to LA? Soon. That's the answer. Soon.
Fair. That's fair.
I really do want to come out again. You know, hopefully, if not the summer next year, the fall. That's
Okay. All right, that's fair. Yeah, no one wants to come now because it's fucking 20 and it's going to be 20 until fucking March. So,
I'm not going to leave New Hampshire to go to fucking Chicago right now.
right. Maybe LA,
Yeah, well,
but,
hey, yeah.
but not, yeah, no. Yeah. No, that's cool, man. Yeah. You should plan on spending some time here because we could do some damage. We could have some fun.
Yeah, definitely, definitely, man. Well, listen, we're gonna have to do a part two sometime in the future.
I'll do it tomorrow. I don't care.
Until then, where's the best place for people to follow you and keep track of what you're doing?
I'm woefully bad with all that stuff. I'm just Facebook and Twitter. That's it. I'm on Blue Sky, but I haven't done much there yet. I don't have on my own .com. I should, but I don't. So Facebook's usually the best place to find me.
All right, so I can put your Facebook link in the video when I post it.
Absolutely.
Right on, man. Well, listen, it's been great, even though my voice is gone.
It is.
Uh, I'm not. It doesn't even hurt. It's just gone. You know.
Right.
So as long as it doesn't hurt, I'm all right.
Exactly.
But listen, man. When I started doing these videos, I knew I had to do one with you. You've got great stories. You've got a great heart, and I've always, in the years we've known each other, I've always really appreciated our friendship and our ball busting, as people in Chicago do.
That's how you know I like you.
Right, that's right. So I really couldn't be happier to have spent the afternoon talking like this, and I appreciate the stories. I appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Man, right back at you. I love you and I love this. And I'm so grateful that you included me in this. I love this that you're doing, and I'm just proud to be part of one. So thank you.
My pleasure, Steve. We'll do it again real soon. Yeah.
All right, pal. Get better.
Thank you. Take care.
See ya.